Welcome everybody to our second installment of the Friends of the Library lecture series for this year. Tonight we have with us a personal friend of mine and a former professor of photography, Jose Betancourt. I'll just kind of quickly tell you a little bit about Jose and what we're going to talk about tonight, and I won't take up too much of your time. Jose got a BFA, a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the University of South Florida, and a Master's of Fine Arts at the Hunter College City University in New York, where he studied with Roy DeCarava, I can't ever say his name, and Mark Feldstein, right? Steen. Jose's won numerous awards, and he's had countless exhibitions and a never-ending stream of students and former students who are big fans. He comes to us today, however, to discuss historical processes in photography and how knowing about those processes can help us in identifying and dating our own personal photographs in our collections. While modern digital photography is easy and convenient, historical and experimental processes continue to pose challenges and intrigue his students, making those classes some of Jose's most popular and were my favorites. So, without further ado, Jose is going to take over and tell us a little bit of photographic history. And we've got an assortment of cameras over here that I'm sure he'll be happy to talk about. And if anybody brought pictures with you, he would be happy to talk about those as well. So I give you Jose Betancourt.
Thank you, Jill.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. I'll just leave it there. I just want to thank Jill for having me here, because I think that this is the most fun for me to be able to talk about photography, and of course she's just an amazing person, ex-student, but good friend, and I would love to see her do so well here in Fayetteville, and she's already doing a lot, I assume, and she's a shaper and a shaker and a shaping, and she's good at all that stuff, so hopefully you're feeling the rumble already of Jillian Rael. So anyway, my idea today was mainly to talk about identifying photographs, and one of the things that I can't help but talk about is the history of photography. I'm going to have to talk about the history to try to get you to understand what to look for. And this is where we're going to start. Of course, this is the beginning of photography. It's the two most popular inventions. 1835 was Henry Fox Talbot's invention of the salt print, which is basically silver and salt on paper. And you're probably not going to have anything like this, but I need to mention it because this is the beginning of photography, and you'll see how silver is a big part of how all the processes are used and exposed to light. And then the big invention really was in 1839 with Daguerre, and of course you guys, all of you may know the daguerreotype as being the first process, and Daguerre, of course, was in Paris, France, but his invention took off very quickly and spread into the United States very quickly, and Matthew Brady and some other photographers took it up right away. And by 1839, by the end of that year of the announcement, it was already in the United States, and by 1840 there were plenty of daguerreotypists in this country. So let me show you a little bit about Talbot. That, you know, Talbot's one of my favorites, so I don't want to discount him as being one of the first photographers. He's left out of a lot of books because his idea of the invention was completely different than Daguerre. Daguerre was working on an actual silver plate, and Talbot used an emulsion, something that he could spread on paper and expose to light. And this is one of his prints from just a contact print. I'll probably use that word again, contact, because it's basically just a lace on light-sensitive paper exposed to sunlight, and then you get the impression of the lace. So a lot of people don't think of this as photography because there's no camera, but it is photography because it's made with light. And then, of course, we get to another process, the cyanotype, which I'll talk about again later on because it actually comes back in the late 19th century. Anna Atkins, the first female photographer and the first person to publish a book, believe it or not. She beat Talbot by a few months on publishing her book about British algae. This is a fern, of course, but her first book was on British algae. And we're talking here about, this process was about 1851 or so. And the process is, the idea of the cyanotype for photographs was John Herschel's idea. And if you don't know, if you know a little bit of astronomy, the Herschels are very famous for their exploration and their famous telescopes in England. So here's the first camera, the daguerreotype camera that is, and as you can see it's just a box with a lens, and I haven't put the word camera obscura up here, but that's mainly what it's called. It's a camera obscura, and that means dark chamber or dark room, and all it is an aperture with a rear panel that holds whatever film or plate, whatever you're using, and the light goes through the aperture and exposes the plate. Now the thing with the daguerreotype though is that it is, let me go back, the daguerreotype is on a plate, but it's not a glass plate and it's not film. At this time it's still a silver plate, a polished silver plate, and I'll show you what that looks like. So the daguerreotype comes in all these sizes, and these sizes came through the 19th century as being kind of standardized. A lot of the plates and a lot of the films were in this measurement, in these measurements. And I'll show you. We can go back. There is a couple of things that happen later. There are smaller sizes that you get. Here's a 16th plate, 1 inch. You get smaller than that later on as a tintype. And then the whole plate, the double hole plate, becomes even larger, and they actually call it a mammoth plate. So there are a couple of different things that happen later on as far as smaller and larger. But these are very important to remember because everything kind of bases itself on these sizes from the beginning. And we don't use these sizes anymore, of course. So here are the parts for the daguerreotype. You see that they usually came in a case, most likely. So you would have a case on the top, or in the back you see the case. Then you see the plate, which is the silver plate that's oxidized. You see the edges around it, kind of oxidized. You have the glass. This is not in the right order. There should be the glass. Anyway, so you see that there's like a matte, which is the gold. Then you have a glass, and then you have another kind of decorative edge to it, which is it's almost like a light tin metal that surrounds the picture. And let me show you what it looks like when you put it together. Now, one of the things that you can see is this mirrored effect, but these are the different components put together. The mirrored effect is one of those ways that you can figure out what a daguerreotype looks like. One of the things that I always get asked is what's the difference between the daguerreotype and the rest of the processes. And if you can think of it as being a mirror, because that silver, the plate, is polished so much that you can see yourself. I mean, it's very, very apparent that it's like a mirror. So when you look at a daguerreotype to the side, you will see the reflection of, whatever's above you. So you can see that the image is barely there, but then when you turn it, so you turn it this way, there's the image that's on that plate. So that's one of the easiest ways to identify it, is just through that mirror image. It's high gloss. You're seeing, if you can look beyond the image, you're seeing the reflection of whatever's around you. If you have any questions, stop me.
I do. What
Yes.
did you just do?
What did I do?
You said you turned it.
Look at the angle. The angle is like I'm looking this way, and then I'm bringing it towards me. So back and then forward. The top is brought forward. And yeah, go ahead because we may run out of time, so go ahead and ask questions now. You won't be interrupting. So one of the other things, and I don't see the colors correctly here, but one of the things that you could rely on for identifying a daguerreotype is the backing. The silver plate was on copper. So if you were to take the daguerreotype out of the case and look at the back, if it's a copper backing, it's most likely a daguerreotype. So between the mirrored image and the copper backing, you should be pretty close to identifying a true daguerreotype. And this one, if you notice, there's tape underneath the tin, decorative tin. There's tape around there, and a lot of them were sealed. And this is one of those things where there are mixed feelings about whether you should clean a daguerreotype, and if it has its original sealing tape and it looks great, do not touch it. Just let it be, because you can cause more damage to it. And if you do have a problem with any kind of dust or tarnish or anything like that, you could get it restored. But then again, I just would find somebody that knows how to do it rather than to try to clean it yourself, because it is a little bit more complicated. So this is the daguerreotype image, and it's one of the sharpest images you can get from the 19th century. It's really amazing how sharp these photographs were. And of course, I can mention a couple little things to look at as far as value goes, because I think that people just go crazy collecting these, and a lot of them that have the signature embossed down at the mat, the metal mat. You see, there's a couple of writing, lettering. The lettering here says Broadway, and then on the other side says Anson. So that was the studio, and the address. Seems like I see Broadway a lot, and I think Broadway, New York, but it's not. A lot of places had Broadway. So I always think, wow, there are a lot of places in New York, a lot of studios on Broadway, but you'll see that a lot. So these cases are pretty amazing. So some people actually just collect the cases, and it's a little sad when you start seeing nice cases without the actual images, and people are always taking things out, and it happens a lot. Of course, I'm on eBay a lot researching all this stuff, so a lot of times you'll see an album and you see that they group the pictures from the album in lots of 4 or more, and they'll sell the pictures and then they'll sell the album by itself, and it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad that goes that way, but people make more money doing that if they sell individually. So this is a really amazing case. It's two-sided, and it folds up like a book. So here's the first person, and there's the lady on the other side, and then that's the case that has a little locket on it, and that should be a greenish felt, and some of it's worn off. Here's another amazing case that I found. You see the extra gold border on the velvet side, and then it's another book, and it's got mother of pearl on the front. So if you see anything like that, that's pretty amazing. There's an H. Tarnish is not a real term. It's supposed to be tarnish. There's an H cut off for some reason. Okay. You see the stripe on there's a long line across his eye. That's a tarnish mark. And normally, you don't touch it. Especially if the tarnish is something that really bothers you, you could get it fixed. But in this case, it's just part of the piece, and that's really the way it should be. And if you look at the seals, and the seals are still good, and you still get tarnish on the bottom here and the line on the top, and I would consider that it's still a good daguerreotype, and you should think twice about really repairing it too much. Okay, so we went from 1839 now into about 1854. We come to the ambrotype. And the ambrotype is it's an interesting process because it is on collodion. I don't know if any of you know collodion is like a cellulose. So they called the process wet collodion. Wet collodion means that you have to take the picture while it's still wet, and the silver is still wet within the collodion. And the way it's made is you pour the collodion with the silver on top of the glass. It sets pretty quickly, put it in the camera, and you expose the picture. And this is actually on glass now. It's not on the silver plate. So you can see the difference here. Okay, so the dark of the picture is from the background. It's either black felt, black paint, and you can see the negative image coming off of the background, right? And then that's what it looks like completely off. So this is the first time also that we see that now we can produce a negative. So this is the beginning of when you start seeing negative to print. And of course, the printing process takes all different turns and ideas, so we'll go through those. So here's a collodion, a traveling ambrotype studio, but I put collodion so you could see the word. And this would be something very common where you would take a wagon and park it somewhere and take pictures of everybody. And I don't know if you can tell, there are all these kids here looking at the samples. This is kind of, I like that picture for that reason, because they're excited that the photographer's coming to town. So the next thing that comes around that you may see, and this is very popular, is the carte de visite, and this is the CDV. A lot of you probably have seen that I guess flea markets and collecting places. There's this person that you should know, Disdery. He's the French man that started with the format and the idea of putting it to paper. Now, around this time, there's another interesting process for printing. It's called the albumen print. And the albumen print is another gelatin, but it's based on egg whites. The gelatin is actually from egg whites. So you have silver egg whites that are put onto glass and creates the negative to make the print. But you can see this is another different size that you get. And this is about I would say about 1855 or a little bit later. So now we get into this multiple image where you could actually make 4 or even more at a time, 4 images at a time. Somebody goes in, sits, and you automatically get 4 images. So you can start seeing how people start getting this this card, and carte de visite stands for visiting card. So you would take it and give it to your friends and mail them, or it would be like a calling card basically. So here's a multiple exposure, and then of course you would have to go in there. Most likely the photographer would cut them up and mount them onto those boards. I found this ad that I thought was interesting because it says $2.25 per 1,000. So you can get multiple prints. So if you have let's say you have a big plate camera that shoots maybe 24, a sheet of 24, and you keep putting that plate in there, so 24 at a time, you could get a lot of images. So here's another carte de visite. Start seeing some of the little designs that they made on the back. So I put this one in because we start seeing some hand coloring. I mean, we see hand coloring all the way back into the daguerreotype, the whole era of the daguerreotype. But then we start seeing it everywhere else. We slowly start seeing more kind of those rosy cheeks, and sometimes you just see one thing and that's painted, and this happens to be the sash. Yes.
Question: would you comment on the length of exposure that would use the various media that you described here,
Mhm.
and the length of time that say in the case of a portrait,
Sure.
the party would have to remain immobile,
Right.
etc.
Well, I didn't put
That may
anything.
change.
I didn't put anything to show the head clamp, but I'm sure some of you may have seen the head clamp where you can't move. You got to sit and then get your head clamp back here, and most likely the beginnings of photography could have been minutes, but by this time we're talking maybe seconds, like 30 seconds or so. So it's cut down from, I would say maybe the first ambrotypes were probably already in seconds to a minute. So it was less. Now I know that if you get down to some of the daguerreotypes indoors, you could get down into minutes. But a lot of times, and you got to realize also that a lot of times you need ultraviolet light, so you need daylight to expose most of this. And a lot of the studios would have skylights. So you see some of the old studios that have the lights that you have some kind of filtering device, maybe some kind of sheets of white sheets or translucent sheets, and then you pull them back when you're using the sky. But I think I may have something like that here.
Well, the tinting was that with watercolor or something like that.
You know, most of them I think they were oils. Yeah, because when we started, when I was learning how to do the hand tinting, a lot of them were oils, and it was something that had been used for a long time. Yeah. So this one, I wanted to show you, this is another way to date, is with the tax stamps. I don't know if you've seen, during the war there were taxes on photographs and paper, and this was, well, 1862 to 66 was where you see it the most, and that's an easy way to date the carte de visites. Yeah, sure. To pay the war, pay for. Yeah. Yeah. So if you had the big plate with all the little pictures, they could just use that plate and make some more for you. Yeah. So I found this one at 1866. That's why I put it in here, because this is one of the later ones with the stamp. It went from 1 to 2 cents. Okay, so then the next process is basically the same process as the ambrotype, meaning it's still collodion, but this time it's on metal. And most of you know the name tintype, and really it's it should be technically called a ferrotype, because ferro is iron, and these rust. So tin was not really the correct term for them, but that's the term that stuck with them, and we still know them as tintypes today. So you'll see some of them that have a rusty edge or something that's flaking off with a bubble underneath, and that's just from the moisture. But these are all about the same size as the daguerreotypes, about a 16th plate. You have these that are smaller. These would be considered close to a 9th plate. And then this is a 16th plate. And then there's another one that's a gem that's even smaller than that. So with the tintype, one of the things, it's on metal. So you don't see the background. You actually look at the surface. The surface is that crackling collodion that sits on top of the metal. So if you turn it sideways, you can see the crackling collodion, or varnish sometimes, or if they wanted to preserve the image, they actually poured varnish on top to protect it. So that could be the crackling also. So this is something, and these are worth a lot too. If you have portraits they're pretty common, but these are not so common. These are places. The earlier tintypes were used a lot for portraits, but not necessarily for places, so they're more expensive. And I put this one in because of the backward letters. So this shows you that when you're taking a picture, you're flipping it around to get it to be corrected. But if you're doing a daguerreotype or a tintype, it's going to be backwards. If you do a negative, you flip the negative to make it look correct. So if you see a process that goes directly from the camera to the plate, and it has lettering, and it's backwards, it's either a daguerreotype or a tintype. These are the cameras with the multiple lenses. You can see the size. There's a there's a carte de visite right here. So you can see the size, how big the cameras were. So these are the gem sizes, tintypes, and they're probably about an inch. Of course, a lot of them still use that same idea of the tin frame or the metal foil frame, matte. And this is another size. It's a carte de visite size within the matting. So you see that that size was still used a lot. So this is another thing that you may see in an old photograph, is where it was stored. And of course this one was inside a frame that had an oval opening. And it's slightly hand tinted. I don't think you can see it on there, but it has a little bit of a tint to it. And I put this one in because sometimes they go a little bit too far. It's like, yeah, you know, I'm all for photography, so if you're going to make it look like a painting, go get a painting done, right? Okay, and then I wanted to show you another really amazing case. This gutta percha is a popular case that you would see, and it's basically a resin, a tree sap that's been molded. And I have a... Sorry?
It's very durable.
It is durable, that's right. And you know, one of the things that I always tell everyone is that it was used for insulation. A lot of the cables across the ocean were insulated with gutta percha. So it's one of those things where, you know, if it could be in the salt water for forever, then I do have it in my bag, but I don't... Oh, there it is. So here's a gutta percha case here, and you can see they were pretty elaborate, and it's basically one of the first plastics. That's what it is. Okay, and let me go back. You see the gold? So there's a gold tinting in there also. And then we have the gold tinting on this soldier. If you have anything like this, it's worth lots of money. I took this from eBay and went for $700, and it's a it's a regular tintype. It's a probably a 2 by 3.5, 2.5 by 3, something like that. So I needed to put this in here because these are fun for me. These are the memorial photographs. So here's a tintype memorial of a gentleman that's passed away with the symbolism, some symbolism there of the grain, and I'm not sure if that's an anchor. An anchor was used a lot with memorial pictures. And you'll see this one also, where you have this nice drawing around it. It's also a memorial. Now this is the drawing with the mat. And this one I liked because it was supposed to be a horizontal, but they put the picture in landscape. I mean, vertical, so. And then ghosts. So, you know, we're talking about how you make copies of things. So at this time, we were already taking copies from old daguerreotypes or old tintypes and making negatives. So you can take a picture. This is all darkroom tricks, you know, although some people actually believed it, you know, that it was really happening. But anyway, so these would have been old photographs that would be superimposed in the darkroom, and those are your loved ones that are no longer around.
No one's happy.
Well, you know, maybe it's...
Serious, you know.
I don't think smiling came around for a long time.
It's the 20th century.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that smile, cheese, that didn't come around for a long time.
Downhill ever since.
They would have excused the expression that someone was grinning like a mule eating brow.
Right. You know, but unusual things like that. The smiling 19th century tintypes are worth a lot of money for that reason. Right. Another in mourning here. So here's this is a daguerreotype locket. I guess it would have been almost, it could have been a necklace. Did you say hair?
Sometimes
Well, here's a little container in the back.
I was looking for it.
Yeah, it's on the back of this one, but sometimes they would go ahead and put it in there with the picture. Right. And then, of course, you have the cabinet card. Now, the cabinet card came later. It's probably 1870s, 60s, and of course, it's bigger. It's going to be a larger. So here's the cabinet card, and here's the carte de visite. So you can see that it's a pretty nice size.
Did those stay popular up to the 20th century?
The cabinet cards? Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I have another one. This is from the 20th century here, and this one I don't have it up there, but it has the memorial locket. So I mean, this carried on into the 20th century, and of course, this is a different print. This is the gelatin silver print that we use today. So you can see also the tone. These are albumen, so they have the little bit of a sepia look to it, and then this is more of the black, truer black. And I have this. I bought this because I thought it was a memorial shot, but I've never seen it like that before, where it has those just the cards. Normally, this is the way you see these scrolls. It's usually the way you see the memorials, but that one was a little bit different, so I bought it. And of course, this is what I was saying about this copying. There's a lot of copying going on around this time, and from here on, it does become a problem trying to identify certain types of photography, because you're looking at a copy of something and you're not sure if you should be dating the image or should be dating the actual piece. So it could be a little complicated there. But this would probably be, it could be a daguerreotype locket that's been opened and copied, and then that's a cabinet card. There's the scroll memorial. And I thought this was interesting because of the cat. There's a cat, and it looks like, I don't know if it's a fan. I'm not sure.
Chinese plants.
That's what it looks like, right?
They were, fascinated with
Mm-hmm.
Japanese.
Right. And of course, then sometimes you see this type of memorial where it could be in the studio, or sometimes it could be in someone's home, depending on the situation, but that's probably in a studio, I would think. And then, of course, I didn't put any post-mortem because I didn't know what our audience would be, but I did get you a sick person in bed, because then that You could see that everyone wants to take a picture towards the end to remember somebody. If they don't have any pictures throughout their life, this would be a time to get a picture. So you'll see a lot of sick or dead.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
At what time did, I do a lot of genealogy, and I've read about where maybe family member died, and then they would take that person, and the rest of the family have a photograph made.
Well, this is
With
all
that
throughout this
person?
time. This is all. I mean, it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly one date, but I would say even into like around the Civil War, you could see post-mortem, right? But you would have different styles. You could have the whole family. It could just be at the funeral, at the wake. It could be, I saw one that it was at the cemetery. As soon as they covered up, there's the mound of dirt and the family standing around the grave. So it depended on the family, but you see a lot of different ideas with that. So here's another odd thing that you may see that I kind of like. It's this hidden mother idea. So you hold the baby, but the mother's being taken out somehow. And in this case, you can see if someone's taken this daguerreotype out. Here's the image that was shown in the frame, and then the mother was not visible when it was framed. So you see a lot of things like that that's kind of interesting. And it would have been a fine picture, right, with the mother in it, but it gets even weirder. Here's another hidden mother. But sometimes they tried to hide her, but now it's like a flower.
They tried to make it look like a chair?
Yes.
She
Never thought about that.
is a chair.
How did she sit into that type?
Well, no, this was already getting faster. This is second, so it wouldn't have been something. Yeah. Well, speaking of ghosts, look at that one. So this is a tin type. I was actually bidding on this one for a while. I went for about $70 on eBay. It's just a little odd to us these days, but back then it was probably okay.
I forgot to mention your eBay habit when I used.
Oh yeah. And here's the thing about eBay. You really need to know what's going on with eBay because people don't know what's going on. So they tell you all these things, all these elaborate stories, and sometimes it's just not true. I mean, they don't know how, a lot of people don't know the difference between a daguerreotype and an ambrotype. So you have to really be careful, and you have to hope for there are two things that I hope for: a good picture and money back guarantee, 14 days or whatever, 1 week, whatever it is, because you never know what you're going to get.
Well, you can get you can get in trouble too. I know we looked at, in a couple of classes, we were looking at some eBay advertisements that were Civil War units of like all black soldiers from the Confederacy, and all it took was a little bit of photoshopping, and you can change all that U.S. to Confederate, and it was going for like $100 on eBay.
Yeah, no, you have to.
Well, I should bring up an example of
Yeah,
that.
well, that was actually
Yes.
the class, yes.
Yeah.
There was a Louisiana unit, I think, or something.
Yeah.
that
it was
Yeah.
the
had
first
been
Louisiana.
manipulated.
Yeah, you have to really be careful. Well, you're supposed to look at the baby. That's it. But you're not supposed to notice that there's this weird shape there,
I guess to keep the baby from crying.
Yeah. Oh, is that what you mean? Just so that she still feels like she's held and she's not flopping around and falling off the chair, and even trying to keep her still enough. Even though we're talking about seconds, you don't want to move too much. So here's the big turnaround. Here is the dry plate negative, and the dry plate meant that you could have a coated glass that was already dry. So that means you could store it and you can sell it in a pack, and you can put it into your camera and expose it. So this is the beginning of how anybody can shoot. You don't have to pour the chemistry on your glass and do a wet plate really quickly, and you can actually take your film anywhere you want. And here's the box. A lot of the beginnings of this really were Kodak, and there are a lot of stories about how Kodak kind of stole things, and so George Eastman was really ambitious, so he took over this and became pretty popular with the dry plates. And we're talking about 1888, 1890. One of the things that you would do is you can see the size. At this time, we still don't have small cameras, so anything that's about 4 by 5 or a little bit under, and then up to 5 by 7, 8 by 10. I don't think you'd find 11 by 14, but it does exist. Those are the negatives that we're talking about around this time. And then this is more consumer, and it doesn't really say a size on here, but I assume these are about 4 by 5 inches. So here's where the cyanotype comes back. The cyanotype, which is this right here, it's the blueprint. And of course, you see how the lace, so this lady goes this way. I was holding her this way. The lace is contact printed, so the actual size is what you see on here. So if you see a picture of a cyanotype, that means that the negative was that size. It has to be negative right on top, and then you cut it out, and that was your print size. I forgot to show you this. Here's an ambrotype. So this is a full plate ambrotype. That would have been one of the largest plates that you could do. Okay, and then we get into postcards, and I put the blueprint or the cyanotype postcards, but you'll also see regular postcards, and I brought a couple of them also. You'll see that they actually were exposed, and then you could send them to your loved ones. So these are the albums that I was talking about, where people will sell them on eBay and then they empty them out, sell them separately, sell the pictures separately, and you'll see that they have mainly this size page would be for the carte de visite size, and then you'll have the cabinet card size also. And in this case, the cabinet card size would probably take up an entire sheet in the middle, centered in the middle. They usually have either some kind of leather or felt, some kind of velvety exterior. Okay, so then by the time that Kodak got the company going, by the 1890s, they experimented with film, with roll film, and a lot of it had to do with the beginning of actual movies and rolls of film. So it all kind of came together by the end of the 19th century. And by the 20th century, everyone was able to buy a handheld camera, which is very similar to this last one here. Just a box, and you have some kind of mechanism where you turn and advance the film. So, and that was one of the first ones there. The thing with this, I mean, you got to realize that you may have had an aperture adjustment, which means something that lets in light through the front of the camera. But as far as your shutter speed, it pretty much was the same speed. It would take the same. Just all you could do is just press the button, and then this one locks down and comes back up. So you have this picture and this picture. So it actually gets itself ready for the next picture. So with the roll films, you get these spools, and of course, these are the earlier ones, or the larger ones, and then of course we get smaller and smaller. And a lot of you probably have even used the medium format, which is 120. And 120 was popular for years, and a lot of the times it would give you a square image. So you would have this size negative. And this is something that I see a lot of, even from the early 1920s, 1930s. Well, let's say for the average person, it would be more towards 1930, 1940. But the first ones were around 1920s. But you would see just negatives. People just don't realize that they have negatives, but they don't have the prints. So I would really consider these days you could just scan them and get at least an image. Then, of course, the 35 millimeter. This is around also 1920s and 30s. By the 30s, people were able to buy these roll films, and a lot of them. Yeah, go ahead.
Just backtracking time a little bit, what was the approximate date of appearance of the Brownie camera?
Well, the Brownie number one, this is not a number one, but the Brownie number one, which is what I showed earlier, that's probably going to be late, I would say 1890s would be the first ones. And then going into the first, there was a time, and I can't remember the exact date, but there was a time when Kodak gave kids a free camera. I don't know if you heard about that. It was a big marketing scheme.
If people knew how the amazing woman in Kentucky, the blind Maggie Sale,
Mhm.
the Kentucky School for the for the deaf, excuse me,
Mhm.
wrote off, and all the children in schools like that were given cameras.
Right, and I would say that's already into the 1900s from what I recall. It's probably in the early, so by the time we get into even into the 1920s, we still have plenty of cameras that look very similar to this. It's just basically still a box.
A follow-up question to that. What is the origin or early meaning of the word Kodak? You know about Mr. George Eastman,
You know what? There's this film that I show at school, and it's the person that's talking says that there's really no real idea why. Somebody says that he just liked he liked that word, and he liked the letter K. So it's just a completely made up word from what they say.
wouldn't be the last time.
Yeah. But he was into marketing, so he was probably trying to find a word that was very simple and kind of had some kind of, rhythm, or
They could remember it.
they can remember it. That's right. And the K starts with a K, ends with a K. So,
There you go.
yep.
Very simple as that.
So here are the sizes from the 120 film. And you can see that some cameras, it was for multiple cameras, so you could get 16, 12, or 8 exposures. Depending on the camera you could load it to. And of course these are a little bit of an example of the early Kodak cameras. And I decided to just stick with Kodak since I was already talking about them. But of course these cameras came out all over the world, and there were plenty of other companies that had these formats. This is the twin lens, where it focuses with the top and takes the picture with the bottom. Then you had a little 127, which is this one right here. Another Brownie. He used the word brown, and I don't know the thing about the Brownie either. But there were so many Brownies, and the Bakelite Brownies are collectible also, these plastic ones. And then, of course, the 35 millimeters, which became really famous. By the 40s, I think that most people were shooting 35 or could afford a 35 millimeter camera. And then the only other one that I thought I would put